let's talk about the importance of storytelling, why you feel it's so important, how you think it can help with empowering Africans in general and help to achieve the goal, which I'm trying to set out to do in this podcast, which is to empower Africans and increase the global respect for the Black and African diaspora. So how do you think storytelling can help to achieve that?
Storytelling is like predicting the future, or it's like setting a pace for what should be. As much as a lot of us, the storytelling like, oh, it's just some stories you're telling. No, it's actually a life being built or the past being shaped into the mindsets of people. I could also say storytelling is like past and present history as much as it is future history. So it is very important for Africans to tell African story because we are the ones who are facing our challenges. We are the ones who are facing our challenges. We are the ones who are going through whatever we are going through. We are the ones who understand the trajectory of what should be and what is not.
How we can possibly empower Africans through the power of storytelling.
African stories should be told by Africans because we as African storytellers who understand what we are facing, we understand the trajectory of what African life is, what Africans go through, and what possibly could be done to change the face of Africa through storytelling. It's just like when you watch a movie. When you watch movies, mostly Africans are portrayed like the poor people, the malnourished people, starvation. And that's what the West did so much that a lot of people actually, when they come to Africa, Nigeria or Ghana or any other African country and they see civilization, oh, it's actually a lovely place. Yeah, it is a lovely place. Of course, what would you think? But you don't blame them because the stories they have been given is a one-sided story that, oh, we are so malnourished and impoverished, So when we as African storytellers actually put out our stories there, we actually let the world know, we change the trajectory of what we see, of what the people coming after us get to understand what they read and how they change their mentality and towards us as Africans and to empower writers in Africa. I believe strongly that if we can start appreciating the writers we have here and we choosing to publish ourselves without having to go through like, okay, I have a wonderful the people who have read through that manuscript, I mean, that's an Irish agent say she lost the story. The story is an amazing story, and it concerns how people view dissociative identity or disorder in Africa. Because something like that, if you have that in Africa, you're turned either a witch or you're suffering from some disease or something. Nobody believes that mental health is real. Nobody believes that actually somebody in Africa or in Ghana or in Nigeria is going to go through dissociative identity disorder. But we face it every day. So these are our stories to tell. But I can't get that book published now because a Western person can't publish it for me. And if an African publishes for me, what's the possibility that it will go far? That what is the assurance that I can get that a whole lot of places?
So you were saying that if an African house was to publish, an African company was to publish books, you don't think it would go as far as if a Western agency was to publish the book or Western publisher was to do it?
A lot of bookshops or a lot of places where books are sold, a lot of places where they can go to. The African people don't have access to this. And even though they do, they have a certain limitation. So it's like, oh, the Western people, they can get my books as far. Now we have a lot of Nigerian authors, let me not say African, Nigerian authors who are very known, but they have lived their entire lives in the UK. And so they were not published by Nigerians or African publishers. The reason they are this known is because they live in the UK, they live in the US, these stories that do not actually tell African stories. These stories that are more of projecting the West into Africa.
Also, is there something about the fact that mental health is stigmatized? So the nature of the book and its audiences?
Yeah, there were two Nigerian authors I read. One stays she was born in the US and the other in the UK. And when I read both stories, both novels, it was nothing related to Africa. I mean, it was an African story, but they told it in a UK sense of way, an American sense of way that they don't portray anything Africa. Because that's where they live their entire life. They have not really stated what it is to be an African. They haven't stated what it is to be in Africa and to go through the nuances you go through in Africa. But I mean, because the fact that they are in the US, they can write, they have this few African terminologies they've heard from their parents probably. So they just insert it in the book and then, oh, she's using an African book. I just found out that the bookshops in Nigeria are promoting these people way more than the Nigerians who live in Nigeria and have written good books. Simply because
I see.
they're outside the country. They were published outside the country. So they are promoted way above those who are living in the country and have gone through the stories in the country and have written very outstanding stories.
So we are prioritizing
we are
work
prioritizing
coming from European lands.
Coming from other, we are prioritizing that. That's the basic truth.
And do you think this is a legacy of colonization? This is a legacy of us thinking they're better than us?
Yeah, they think.
Or anything that happens in the white man's land is better than anything we can produce in our land?
It is deeply rooted in that. It is deeply rooted in that. If you go to a lot of, now, let me divert a little from even the right. If you go to radio stations, half of the OAPs, the presenters and the rest, they have accent. If you're not from the UK, because people just come from the UK, Nigerians, it's difficult to get a job in the UK, it's difficult to get a job in the US. Then they come to Nigeria, as long as they know that I was in the UK or I'm in the US, it will be easier for me to get a job. And that's what is done. So if you go to the radio stations, they have the accent, the American accent or the UK accent. And if you were not born there or live there, you have to groom it because you have to stand and push on the radio. And it doesn't sit well. You watch reality shows and those who have their Igbo accent, they are being taunted because, why is she speaking like that? I mean, she's an Igbo girl. How do you expect her to speak? So it is deeply rooted in colonization. It's deeply rooted in the fact that they put above ourselves those who have the whiter skin color. Because even the Black Americans who are in the US look down on the Africans. And sometimes whenever there is that battle between Black Americans and Africans on social media, Twitter especially, the way they look at Africans, please, we are not one of you, we are Black Americans. What the hell? You are Africans. You're not better than us because you have American ties to you or something. So it's just that mentality. It's a mentality that as long as you're African, you are lower, you are beneath, you are not as good as. And if you've watched the Africans who have risen, and not all the Africans, not all definitely, but majority of the Africans who have risen to a pedestal in their professions, whatever the professions are, they were brought out by the Western. They were noticed by the Western. They were made known to the world by the Western. Because even in Nigeria, you will not be known as much until the Westerners recognize you. Before you're fully recognized.
I see.
And it is a sorry state, but that's what we are facing. It's just like how people would ask me when I say, I don't have any interest in being in the West. I mean, if I have to go to the US or something, I have to go because I have a reason probably to go write or do a research. And then I come back and they're like, why? Are you okay? Why would you want to go live there? I'm like, what is wrong with Africa? Why can't I live in Africa? But it's all rooted in as much as we don't like to believe it, it's all rooted in what Africa went through colonization. We always still view it. I was talking to a friend recently. He posted something on his WhatsApp status that has talked about cultural appropriation. And I was saying, all these people who talk about, you see a white person, on our rules, that you're like, you're cultural then. And I'm like, but you have my kind of hair fixed to your head. It's not your natural hair. Unless you're carrying an afro, you don't have the right to tell the person carrying a cornrow, a white person carrying a cornrow, that they're cultural appropriation. I mean, you are also doing what they are doing. Have the mind, have the pride.
Cultural appropriation,
And have the pride in you to have your own afro before you can tell somebody else that they're doing what is not theirs. But, I mean, we put anything that comes from the white above us. And ours might be very good. It's the same thing happening in Nigeria. We have this guy in no school. He makes vehicles. And his vehicles are good, but his vehicles are not accepted by the government of Nigeria. I mean, it's taking a whole lot of price and battle. Why? Because it's made in Nigeria. They would rather import vehicles outside than promote a Nigerian who makes good vehicles because it's not Nigerian that made it, so it's not good. So we have that mentality that as long as it is made in Africa, it is not good. We import things as little as toothpick. We import all those things. Why? So it all boils down to...
And do you think...
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to recap the point that we're making and just so I can make sure that I understand your perspective. So an important way or great way to empower Africans in general is by making sure that we tell our own stories and we get our stories out there, right? However, in order for us to get our stories out there, we are facing this barrier where we have to go through publishers, and the publishing ecosystem in Nigeria and Ghana from your experience hasn't been that great. So you have to go through Western publishers and rely on them to say yes or no. So if there was a way for us to get the storytellers within Africa to share their stories with other Africans and make their stories go global from Africa without having to go through the West, you think that would be a great start to
That would
solving
be
this?
not just a great, but an amazing start and foundation. That would be an amazing foundation to begin a whole lot, because there is a whole lot that African writers can do for themselves without having to wait for the West. So if that can be done, that would be amazing.